Welcome, everyone. Looks like we've got a few people joining, so we'll give people let's say another minute or two here to join. But again, thanks for joining today. Welcome to your Google Workspace Resource Guide Admin 101. Really kind of a one-stop shop here at the start to just make sure you're enabled and equipped with resources here with Workspace, making sure you're kind of starting and understanding the lay of the land of resources and all that fun stuff. And it looks like quite a few of you have already chimed in on the chat on the right-hand side there. So feel free to kind of tell us where you're joining from. Also, please feel free to use that right-hand panel for questions. Lauren, my colleague as well, will be sharing some resources, kind of some of the key components that we talked through on the slide in there as well, or in the presentation as well. But feel free to ask any questions in there. For the sake of today's presentation, we'll address those at the end just for the flow of it, but would love to kind of answer any of those questions that you have that come up along the way, and we can address those at the end. Perfect. We'll give people another minute or so, and then we can go ahead and get started. Awesome. Well, let's go ahead and get started. So for the sake of introduction, I'm Nick Alexander. I'm a customer success manager here at Google Cloud, specifically on Google Workspace. So kind of my role is to work with customers in kind of a scaled fashion to enable you to make sure that you are really kind of equipped with resources, best practices, guides, and just understanding how to kind of along the customer journey, both kind of in the onboarding phase here of understanding kind of the early stages of resources, kind of how to get kickstarted with your workspace journey and or transition, all the way through kind of the adoption process. So kind of the sake of today's call really is going to be kind of either admin focused or developer focused, really just understanding kind of the lay of the land of the resources. So what resources and tools we have out there, kind of how to really just make sure that you and your team and ultimately your organization are enabled with resources, kind of where to go with either questions, concerns, kind of finding about product updates. So really just kind of understanding kind of the resource map and the how-tos to make sure that you are equipped to kind of dive into that self-service model of support. So we'll go ahead and get started. So as you can see here, we've got kind of a long laundry list and or CBS receipt of resources to cover today, which is awesome. We'll dive into the resources. And then like I mentioned before, if you do have any questions on anything here, please feel free to add those in the chat. We'll go ahead and star those and we can cover them in probably the last half of the conversation today. So the first thing we'll talk about is kind of the Google Workspace homepage. It makes sense as this is kind of the landing page of Google Workspace. This is the first place I go to define or to look into kind of certain help topics, kind of how to get started, some of the competitive differentiators, FAQs. Really, kind of this is that point of contact, that initial landing page for you to dive into to kind of see what is coming with Google Workspace and or to kind of dive deeper into components of it. So really, if we look at this, Google Workspace itself, here is kind of that homepage. As we can see here, there's some interactive guides, some how-tos, really kind of clicking this getting started. So if you're new, if you're exploring what Google Workspace is, this is a great place to go to kind of dive into what is out there, what's Google Workspace is, the different components of it, whether that's chat, whether that's Drive, but really understanding kind of how to get started is a great place to go. As you can see here too, kind of also on this screen, really just kind of the latest. So understanding kind of what's coming, what features and functionality have changed and or are updated. Using this kind of, again, just kind of as that initial guide. So it's where you go to if you have kind of any questions, concerns, or ideas, or looking to see what's coming in Workspace. This is a great place to go. Again, we'll dive deeper into kind of some of these, but it's really just kind of that initial interface, right? It's kind of the UI of Google Workspace to really kind of see where this spider web of resource mapping goes. Next, we'll talk about kind of the Google Workspace Admin Help Center. So This really is if you're in a pickle, if you're stuck with a question, concern, looking into kind of what has changed, or if you have questions about billing and subscriptions. I actually saw a lot of the questions that came in from you all that were preceded were around kind of some of these questions of billing and subscriptions. So going into this Workspace Admin Help Center, I would use this really as kind of that resource to understanding kind of tips and tricks, kind of how to get started here. We see the different sections, but then also kind of diving deeper into kind of the setup, the syncing, the billing, kind of looking into the differences between users and domains, kind of potentially what some of those resources look like from, setting up your instance, having different types of users, what the admin panel looks like, really just making sure that you understand this Google Workspace Admin Help Center really is a great place to go to either work with a team and or find your issue. So we could go into here for the sake of today. We could say kind of fix payment and billing issues. If you have a question, concern, comment, this is a great place to go to look at first before kind of adding either that human element of support or how to look into it. So you can see here on this page, if you're in India, maybe this is of interest to you, this alert due to the Reserve Bank of India regulations, kind of some of the ramifications there. Some how-to videos. I think obviously now we live in a day and age where reading through a list of, maybe it's an IKEA dresser you're building, 500 different steps. That's great. Also, we can do this through a video and kind of how to point and click and kind of show us in kind of that self-service model. But again, here, kind of using this admin help center just as that one-stop shop to finding kind of your issues, kind of diving into the support model. And then in this specific use case, we could look at kind of the billing and payment and how to work through that. Again, you can see this is very deep. The video itself probably covers these steps in a different fashion. All of us learn differently. Some of us would like to learn, kind of through this step-by-step process, point, click, all that. And we can kind of see how to fix it in there. So that's kind of the main interface, I would say, from a resourcing perspective, if you're curious on kind of either that getting started, or if you're stuck, or if something looks wrong, or if you have a concern with something like that billing example. So next we'll talk about our Workspace admin community. This asks the user community for help. So this is a great place to go to there's thousands upon thousands of users that kind of outside of either working directly with me, your account team, potentially even a colleague, or shouting over the cubicle in terms of asking a question. This is a great place to go to for kind of that entire Workspace community of admins that are out there that are supporting each other with kind of answering questions either on account setup, potentially things about the admin console, access, recovery, billing. All these are really imperative parts, right, to not only your setup, but to the kind of longevity of your Google Workspace instance. And having this entire community that's working together to kind of provide answers, work together to find solutions, and to kind of drive the business and or your use cases forward kind of as a whole, as opposed to kind of that one-to-one type interaction, is huge. So this is something that I use daily in terms of kind of working with customers or finding information. The community itself is a massive and incredible forum to go kind of dive in. So see what other questions people are asking. As we can see here, here's some featured posts. So even something like our event today could be something like this, but these banners really kind of are those announcements, kind of the trending post. So say you logged into your instance today, your Gmail, and you're seeing this error, as opposed to either asking support or diving into kind of even just Google searching it. This is a great place to go to kind of see what's trending, not only to solve your issues, but to see kind of what other issues customers are having and or kind of enhancements as well. So in this case, if we saw this Gmail error, we've seen, look, 27 people have been on this already, which is awesome. We've got 8 replies. We've got a verified answer or a recommended answer. So in this use case, here's the how-to or the workaround. Again, kind of using this workspace, the community itself, really to kind of dive into everything kind of across the board, from setup, from the admin console, from billing, not only for you to ask your questions, but also to see what other questions people are asking and or kind of you leveraging kind of that entire network as opposed to kind of having that that one-to-one type interaction where maybe you're not the only person that's seen that type of issue. So if there's one takeaway from today, I would say the first place to go to for support would obviously be that admin console. But then I think from a how-to or a greater like networking type perspective of either setup or issues, go to the community. It's an incredible place, incredible plethora of resources that are kind of all across the board in terms of very early stages of your customer journey to very intricate type conversations about kind of unique setup. So next we'll talk about the Google Workspace for Admins community. So this is a bit different. It's the preferred community space with more active users and a more robust variety of resources. So this is a great place to go to kind of for personal posting stats, badges, notification, links to news articles, articles kind of from our product experts and Googlers. So let's go look at what this actually looks like. So as we can see here, as I log in, you can see my username or my alias, my picture up in the top right corner. You can see this is pretty massive, right? We've got 61,000 users. We can see how many users are online and how many different solutions. Obviously, I think leveraging kind of the power of the community, like we mentioned in the last page, is very similar here. On this page, we can kind of you'll see events. So this is actually a webinar that I will be hosting next week. That's kind of a huge interest from the Google Cloud and Workspace perspective is kind of the certification type journey. You can also kind of see what's coming in terms of the community roundup. So kind of a newsletter, actually kind of funny product placement there, but this is the event you are on today. So that might be how you found this event, which is awesome. But also kind of this is the key component of it is kind of the discussion spaces. So as we can see there, there's kind of four unique areas. We've got the workspace Q&A. That's more holistic. That's about asking questions, finding answers, kind of supporting yourself with Workspace. Then we've got the developer discussion space. So, if you're a bit more on the back end, if you're kind of have a bit more of the technical chops and or questions or comments there, the developer space is incredible for that. The refer community, kind of to ask questions, share tips, and kind of earn rewards on recommending Google Workspace. And then the feature ideas. So like any SaaS product or any product in general, kind of hearing your feedback, whether it's updates, whether it's enhancements, whether it's a change to the UI, maybe it's some color schema in Gmail that you don't have because it doesn't fit your company's logo or branding at the time. Using that feature idea to make sure that your voice is being heard, that your ideas are getting out there, and also going in there to search, like we said before, kind of seeing what other questions, what other ideas customers have, partners, anyone that that's logging issues and or trying to get more out of the Workspace product and suite itself. Go to that feature idea tab. As we can see here, here's kind of some of the newer posts. If you're kind of curious or just kind of want to dive in, great place for you to go see what other questions people are asking. Also to answer questions, earning those badges, kind of the top solution authors. This is a huge career thing, right? Is this John Carlos? He's answered 6 questions. It's a great place for him to kind of or anyone to show their expertise in this and kind of build your brand with Google Workspace. So next we'll talk about is the user learning center. So we've talked a little bit about kind of how to find some resources kind of in terms of the admin, the console, the community. Now what we'll talk a bit more about is kind of the learning component of it. So it's great that you can understand where to go find, your questions or comments or concerns. But now kind of what does that look like from a learning journey? How do you actually go in and dive in, start clicking around in Workspace, learning through kind of the different topics. As you can see, kind of the intro to Workspace, going kind of from the very high level, getting started, all the way down to kind of switching from Microsoft or business tutorials or some productivity tips. So this learning user center is an incredible place to go to if you're kind of at day one, if you're looking into what Google Workspace is, kind of maybe you're coming from Office, you've never even seen Google Workspace, what does that look like? Or if you're very deep in the weeds, there's a lot from a learning perspective you can do from kind of a very admin or developer type console sense further on down the line. So as we can see here, this place is awesome. This is how I learned a lot about Google Workspace. It's kind of the getting started tab here. So we could go in. So maybe you're curious about, um, let's say you're curious about setup and services. We could go in here. As you can see, it's kind of a week by week. It's almost going back to, high school or college or university, and saying, what does kind of this syllabus guide look like? What does kind of my learning journey look like from kind of my knowledge base, and then, what I'm curious about. So in this example, it could be kind of curious about that setup in terms of mobile devices, customizing Gmail and calendar, making it something that's usable not only for me, but maybe my team, my department, my organization, something in that sense. So as you can see here, it's a pretty deep overview. You could go into kind of the different components of it. So maybe you're curious about creating the pin, you could dive into that section. But I think the key here is seeing that learning center. As we can see here, kind of the depth of the topics. So it's not just getting started, right? It's not just your day one where you're curious about kind of the getting started about it. You can dive into the specific products, right? We can say, maybe I'm very privy in terms of calendar and Gmail, but I'm not really sure much on Sheets or Slides. I haven't used that. I'm coming from Excel. What's the difference in Sheets there? Using that learn by product is key. And as you can just see here, you can really dive deep into kind of on your own all the different kind of components here, potentially industry specific, some productivity tips. This is a huge one, I think, further on down the line. I use this all the time. And then business tutorials. So kind of if you're looking to kind of collaborate, stay connected, kind of in this hybrid work model, again, just understanding this learning guide for yourself, for your teams, and then obviously I think even going forward, as you've kind of either migrated, you've implemented, or you've started using Workspace, keep this on your radar as kind of the product evolves, as well as kind of your skill set evolves to drive kind of your learning journey. So kind of, again, kind of diving into that, I think we've already kind of showed this, but very similar to this, set up in a different way, is kind of your end user learning path. So what we were just showing might be a bit more technical. It might be a bit more for an admin or developer. This is a great place to go to for kind of that end user. So say potentially you're the admin, you've set up Workspace, you've kind of collaborated with your entire departments or teams and key stakeholders to say, here's what we want Gmail to look like, here's what slides to look like, here's kind of a way for us to support ourselves with folders, with sheets, all of that. This is a good place to go to for not only yourself to learn, but to kind of provide that end user enablement. I think there's a huge wealth of information here for kind of your end users, even yourself, to drive into to kind of start these courses. So maybe you're new to Drive. I think that's one that, is a pretty hot topic for a lot of people as they kind of join this, the Google Workspace and kind of our suite of products, is really having to kind of dive into Google Drive, how to use it effectively, how to collaborate, how to kind of make sure that that information isn't kind of sitting in its different funnels, it's not in space, and really kind of keeping that collaborative environment in a Drive type setting as we're working, around the clock, around the world. We get a million emails a day, chat, all of that. How do we effectively use Drive? So here, for the sake of our example, we could join to enroll the course. And this is a great way for kind of your end users, your teammates, your colleagues, yourself to learn and kind of dive into that from kind of a 30,000 foot view, as opposed to really diving in at the, saying it's already configured. How do I use this? Using kind of these skill boost and learning guides and kind of these videos, these quizzes, just to kind of drive and foster that collaboration and learning model. So you can see here, this is deep, right? We're just on Google Drive and I'm continuing to scroll, which is awesome. But again, kind of with this, find areas and topics that might be good for your stakeholders, for your end users, to dive into this information to learn. And really something you can do with this too is kind of shapeshift and say, maybe I'm the admin, maybe once a week I send out, on Tuesday, I say, here's kind of the skill boost or the challenge you can do. Have a quiz, kind of make it kind of collaborative, make it maybe you could gamify it and say, now that we've done this, can someone build a cool Google Drive and share XYZ? But again, kind of just using these skill boost as a great place to go to kind of dive deeper into kind of the foundational product itself. There's an intro. We don't need to see that. So next we'll talk about some Google Workspace videos and webinars. So kind of similar to today. Obviously, this is kind of a resource guide, kind of we can call it the Admin 101, just making sure that we're providing you that syllabus and list of resources. This is where you could go to register for future webinars. So events like this, the certification one next week, but even deeper, right? Diving deeper into maybe adding domains, authenticating email, managing your accounts. Going to this register for future webinars is a great place to go to kind of see what else is out there, kind of what are hot topics for us here, at Workspace, working with our product, our engineering team to see what's out there. Also, this is a great place to go to, again, kind of a getting started. This is very foundational, signing up. These are people that maybe have never worked with DNS records before. So we can see here, they're pretty short snippets, but they're very digestible. They're great ways to go kind of dive deeper into your learning journey in the getting started phase. As we can see here, I think as we're seeing here, right, we have a good mix of documentation, kind of the how-tos and steps, but also providing kind of that video resource so you can kind of learn on the fly, you can pause, you can go play around with it. So we can see here, kind of, again, just kind of the resource guide, kind of covers a lot of topics, which is incredible. We're only this far on the scroll. We'll go a long ways down. As you can see here, dive into this for some of those how-tos, especially as we get further down here, right? These are some more technical components of it. This is a great place to go to for kind of as an admin or developer to see kind of how some of those more kind of deeper dives into kind of either security, the setup, kind of what that looks like from Workspace in kind of those video how-tos. Again, I kind of already talked to that, but these are great places to go to for kind of that entire catalog, ad hoc. You can watch these on demand, right? You can kind of digest these on your own, and they're kind of across the board. They're from getting started all the way to kind of either expert meetups or some of those setting up your authentication with all those different, letters from the alphabet in terms of security and those components. So now that we've kind of talked about the resources, kind of the how-tos of finding information, some of the videos, now we'll dive a bit deeper into kind of the enterprise deployment guides and resources. So especially if you're in your early stages of your customer journey and or your setup here with Google Workspace, it's kind of the deployment guide, kind of the how-to of either the migration, kind of the change management, or the technical transition guides is a key place to start, right? I think it's understanding, why you bought Workspace is one thing, how to find that information is another, but then diving deeper into like what that actually looks like in terms of the actual configuration and deploying Workspace itself. So as we can see here, again, kind of takes you to another landing page. You can find this in the Admin Help Center. As we can see with all this, really just understanding what to search is a massive component of this. So in terms of the enterprise deployment guides and resources, again, this is kind of the landing page to go to for kind of that technical journey. So you could look at a 90-day rollout plan, kind of high level what that looks like. So, it's always nice to have kind of a guide or a how-to or a starting point from something like rolling out a product to your users, testing your services, the migration in that sense. This is a great place to go to for kind of that high level, whiteboard type view of saying, in the first month, what do we want to accomplish? Kind of having that 30, 60, 90-day plan as a guide. Obviously, each implementation is going to be different. The type of products you're going to be using is different. The way your organization uses these products will be different. But again, kind of having these high level guides and or resources to kind of really make sure that you're understanding foundationally what we would do kind of from a high level in those first 30, 60, 90 days. Either it's us running that implementation, a partner, all of that. So you can see here, kind of running a 5-step pilot. This is really cool, right? Making it kind of a checklist, your Post-it note in a much larger scale of kind of what to run through, what to check off, kind of how to go through this guide. The technical transition guide. So this is a really key component for those of you diving deeper in technically in terms of kind of the transition, the migration, synchronization, networking. that's a key cog there for kind of the actual technical chops of this, right? We're going from one software system or one suite of products here to another. Let's make sure that we're having an easy transition both on the back end, and then ultimately kind of that change management one is how let your users or have your users transition. So obviously it's not always a rip and replace. There's ways to kind of support your end users, your customers, anyone that's using kind of this new Google Workspace setup, kind of helping with the change management of that, easing that transition, making sure your team, your end users are set up for success in that sense. So the next component is kind of our Meet the Expert webinars. So what we've got here, we've already kind of touched on these a little bit, but these are kind of past webinars that we've talked about kind of specific components of Google Workspace, kind of understanding your billing again, kind of the workspace or how to set up Google Workspace account with your own domain. These are just great resources that, either ourselves, our product, our engineering team, our professional services type organizations, our partner network have kind of put together these smaller components of what we call meeting the expert, but these kind of webinar series that again kind of dive into either a specific technical aspect, part of your transition, kind of setting it up, your users in that sense. Again, like you can see here, right? All of these have a depth of kind of ideas. It's not just Gmail, right? It's not just chat. So I think that's a key understanding of this is understanding that there's all the different products, different use cases, even different personas, right? That we're supporting you in that sense, both from webinars, from documentation, and self-service support there. Oops, go to the next slide. So next is customer stories. I think this is a really cool one to see kind of either use cases, examples of how other customers are using Workspace. You can categorize it by industry, maybe even some of you or your companies have kind of been a part of these customer stories. But I think to me, this is a very standout page in that sense of kind of seeing the successes and kind of the hiccups, but also kind of how they overcame that along the way to get to kind of using Google Workspace, whether it's you only use Gmail, chat, and Drive and Calendar, or even you're getting more technical, you're getting to AppSheet, things like that. But just seeing how other customers have kind of implemented, how they've, overcame kind of some of those hiccups and or, really defined their business model and kind of using this entire suite of products to obviously make their end users supported, to ultimately hopefully drive the business more proactively and productively going forward. So again, this is a great place to go dive into. We can see some some companies we've all probably heard of here, Colgate, Nielsen. Just diving into kind of all the stories, we could say, potentially, let's select an industry. Let's say we're curious about food and beverage. We can go in there, we can dive into kind of some use cases. Morrison's, we could go in, see kind of what that customer story looks like. But again, this is kind of a great place to go to kind of see through that kind of entire motion of evolving from a different product, a different suite of products, to kind of the actual like what happened at a customer and or kind of in an industry itself. So we could read through this, kind of see what's happened there. But again, those customer stories are not only comforting for you to understand that other customers have kind of gone through this journey, but a great learning place to go to see, industry specific, even, functionality or product specific components of Workspace, kind of how people kind of made this transition and ultimately helped, made themselves, more productive and more collaborative in that sense. So the next thing is kind of our official blog, Google Cloud. It's company news, it's product updates, it's new initiatives, it's what we call inside Google info, international Google activity, leadership writing and information. Think of this really as kind of either kind of that high level, almost newsletter, kind of if you have back in the day, or if you're still in the office, kind of you've got the TV screen that's scrolling about, maybe it's people's birthdays or work anniversaries, but also with this kind of, what's coming, what's been updated, product updates, kind of new initiatives here at Google Cloud. So we can see here, this is kind of our, again, our official blog. As we can see here, there's kind of all the latest. So this isn't just agnostic to Google Workspace. This is across the board. So we see Google One, the UK, Google Earth, Android, but also we can see Google Workspace, right? So within this, you could go in and search kind of more stories. We could dive into this Google Workspace story. Maybe we're curious on what this story is about. 5-minute read, that's great to know, but it's coming from, again, kind of a group product manager. These are people on the Google side that are very excited to get this information out there to kind of provide this content and information in a digestible sense, kind of through a blog. Kind of talk about, it's kind of almost that who, what, when, where, why, kind of the inception of why this product or came to life. You can see here kind of this fun interactive video. But I think that the key takeaway, right, of these blogs is just kind of understanding from a very, very high level from our side, kind of what we're excited about, the different components, as we can see here. Google Earth, everyone loves that. Dive into kind of what that looks like. But with Workspace, right, we see a component of it here. Kind of piggybacking off that, the next is kind of the cloud blog specifically on Google Workspace. The last side was, Google Cloud. It's that bigger picture. It's more of those products, kind of what's there. With Google Workspace, we've got our own kind of blog itself. So with this blog, kind of all the latest from Google Workspace products, services, kind of the offerings in that sense. Here we've got kind of articles and touch points on this one, right? Improving developer agility and efficiency with Google Workspace. Kind of a mouthful there, but kind of diving in, right? You can read the article, kind of, again, seem like what the latest is. I think this is a great place to go to just to kind of understand what's coming, what's being updated, kind of what that looks like. Improving developer agility, that's the article that was pinned. Google Workspace, GKE help, all of these, right, I think this is a great place to go to from an admin perspective or developer perspective, just to kind of keep an eye on the future, right? To say, it's great, we've set the product up now, we understand Google Workspace from the backend perspective. What does that look like going forward? How are we going to kind of drive our products and solutions and offerings internally and externally using kind of what's coming from Google Workspace? So next is kind of the Google Workspace updates. So like any product, even your phone, your watch, anything that you use that obviously has updates, it's imperative to kind of know where to find this information, what those new features, improvements are that are kind of coming. Kind of, as we can see here, including changes, kind of what's changed, who's impacted, why you're using it, kind of the rollout pace and availability. So the Google Workspace updates. So again, this is kind of more or less kind of the release notes, understanding kind of what's changed, what's coming, kind of what is different than kind of your current setup or your current version. This is, again, the official feed. So kind of this is really kind of the official spot to see kind of what's actually being kind of changed and pushed from kind of the product and engineering sense. Again, kind of it dives into, again, kind of as we can see, the who, what, when, where, why of the specific ask, kind of the rollout pace, the rapid release, scheduled deployments, and the resources. So I think understanding kind of these workspace updates and understanding kind of what's coming is a great place for you to go to, just to make sure you keep an eye on that future, right? From a roadmap perspective, just making sure that you're not stagnating with the product, that you're not just kind of using it in its legacy sense or as is. This is a great place to go to see kind of what different add-ons, what different flavors of workspace, what are different, as we saw at the top with Miro, different product offerings or integrations that really can help you even drive more out of the workspace suite. And next is the release calendar. Like any software system, there's obviously some sort of semblance of a release cadence. With our workspace kind of release calendar, here's where you would kind of dive into kind of, what's coming and what's changed. So as we can see here, you could click on kind of the calendar to see what's evolved, kind of what's coming, kind of, again, this is a great place to go to just to kind of make sure you're staying on top of, the releases themselves, not only that, but what those changes are in terms of the features, the functionality, the end user impact, the back end impact, but really kind of keeping a very high level view of those changes and what's coming is a great place to kind of stay on top of that. So that way you're not kind of, either living in the past or getting, you know, using parts of the functionality and or parts of the products that have either changed or adapted or you could get more out of them. This is a great place to go to understand that. This is great, right? We can go see, what are we on today? July 13th, depending on where you are in the world. Some of you might already be to the 14th. But again, just kind of adjusting the space between content and sites. Again, using just kind of this event calendar to understand kind of what the releases are coming, what's being changed, what's really kind of on the product roadmap, what the excitement and enhancements are from product and engineering that ultimately we've probably heard from you or those of us in the field to really drive kind of all of these different products going forward. Oops, go to the next slide. So next we'll kind of talk about is kind of some top 10 tips for returning to office or continue to collaborate kind of in a hybrid type approach. We'll share this doc after, dive into this more if you kind of on your own liking. But this is something that, we've enabled ourselves on. Obviously, I'm working remote today, as is Lauren. And then we have kind of a hybrid type approach where some of us will be in the office. But I think just kind of understanding on kind of some of the tips and tricks to kind of stay on top of what either returning to the office looks like, kind of how to collaborate in a different model. Obviously, the world is very different than it was 2.5 years ago when products like Google Workspace, weren't necessarily as prevalent to those of us that were in an office, collaborating maybe at a desk or in our cubicles or going and knocking on your boss's door at an office, kind of having some collaborative and informed tips here on how to kind of keep that cadence, kind of keep that human element alive, right? As before, school drop off, my colleague, if I'm trying to ping her or schedule a meeting, that's not a time. And in the office, I would have known that. She could have hollered over and said, hey Nick, I'm dropping the kids off at school today. I'll be in shortly after 9. All of this, right, is just kind of understanding how to use the tools to be more successful. So kind of how to add responsibilities to your calendar, kind of optimizing your calendar for connections and focus. I think all of us, right, would like to not have the little red dot from Google Chat blowing up at all the times. How to kind of make sure that you're baking in that focus time, right? Your head's down, you're going into reports, you're diving into your daily job so you can really collaborate and focus in that sense. But again, this is a great place to go to just to kind of understand kind of not only our kind of some of our guidance, but what other customers have done. People have been operating in this hybrid, this remote type world now for a couple of years. Like, let's learn from others and see kind of what's been successful from them in that sense. Next is kind of the future of work. So I kind of touched on that a bit before, but kind of what does the future of work look like, right? I think as we just talked about in the last kind of those tips and tricks to either hybrid, remote, kind of the workspace in the work world is different than it was before. So kind of how to stay on top of this, how to kind of collaborate, how to make sure that you're getting the most out of not only your future of work, both for yourself, for your team, for your company, but really kind of maximizing that the Google Workspace products to help you deliver on that. So this is a great place to go to kind of see what others have done, kind of how people have either modernized their technology, as we can see here. The hospitals or the healthcare industry has been a massive transition, but then also kind of just building sustainable hybrid work models. There's guides, there's articles, there's blogs. This is a great place to go to, right? Again, making hybrid human again. I've touched on that already, kind of that human element of it. But again, just go here to kind of see what that future of work looks like. This is more kind of that long tail, that long term kind of how we're evolving our products, how we internally are using the Workspace suite to kind of deliver this future of work and then be more productive, collaborative, and ultimately more effective, but also how you can kind of stay on top of that going forward. All right, so next we'll talk about Google Workspace for developers. So now that we've kind of talked a bit more kind of the admin focus, those of us that are developers or want to get even deeper in the weeds, this is a great place to go to see kind of what else is out there. As you can see, kind of the workspace documentation for developers. We've got kind of a deeper subset of products there. So kind of from a developer sense, potentially you're interested in app script, the chat applications, Drive API, the admin SDK, the calendar API. Again, all those kind of those back-end type developer type situations. This Google Workspace for Developers platform or landing page is a great place to go to dive into kind of the technical components of it. So this is massive. As you can see here on the left, we've got kind of the documentation. We've got, again, getting started, the developer products, all the way down to Google Workspace and chat. We've got the support tab also, which you can go to kind of see what the developer support looks like, how to contact support, documentation. But I think this is cool. This is a very robust list, right, from a developer platform on not only the products, not only getting started, but how to dive deep into kind of the back end of these. So let's go to Sheets again. We've kind of used that example today. So maybe I'm curious, I'm a developer, I've got Sheets set up, that's fun. But what does kind of the API look like? Like I'm curious about some of the different components of what the API looks like. Again, kind of either getting started, the reference documentation, great place to go into to kind of dive deeper into kind of the back end, looking at kind of what the tasks, kind of the managing that. But using this developer kind of platform itself as a great place to go to just to find both documentation, work with support, kind of see what the different products look like. That way you can get a bit further, or a bit more kind of from a coding perspective, extending, kind of building your own applications, sharing your solutions with the world, just diving deeper than kind of the out of the box type functionality with Workspace. How can you enhance that? How can you drive more going forward with Workspace? So next is the Google Workspace Developer Newsletter. So very much like that last page, what's cool about this is just kind of a summary or summation, right, of what's changed, what's developed, what's kind of coming with the product updates, features, events. Just again, it's a newsletter. It's a great place for, instead of you having to go search and say, we've got what, 20, 30 some odd type tabs over here on the left. What does that actually look like? What's important? What are the new features and some of the new excitement from the Google developer side that kind of just comes straight to your inbox, right? So you can kind of digest it on your own time. So you can subscribe there. You can also go look at what, past ones. So maybe let's go look at May. Let's see what happened. So introducing the Google Meet live sharing SDK. So you could dive into kind of what that new IO functionality looks like, kind of dive deeper into kind of what the sharing and the streaming and kind of some of the components of Google Meet are. It's a good place to go to, not only from kind of the straight line newsletter to your inbox, or back in the day, newspaper being delivered to your front door. This is a great place to go to see kind of what else has been out there. It's almost like release notes in that sense, but for excitement around kind of new updates, as well as kind of more developer type focused. Next is the developer blog, very similar to the admin blog we covered earlier, but this is, again, just developer focused. So from like the workspace perspective, going in to see what other blogs are out there, what the excitement from, us internally, from both the product sense, from the developer side, and then also kind of use cases, right? How Jira for Google Chat uses the latest platform. But again, just kind of these blogs to kind of take that next level of learning and or understanding kind of what is out there, as opposed to kind of that straight line. Here's the product, here's what it is, here's a how-to video. That's all great, but how do we kind of enhance that with other user stories, other use cases, kind of different parts of the functionality that we might not necessarily just kind of see straight line out of the box. The merch store, all of us love some swag. So if you're curious on that, feel free to kind of go to your merch store, depending on the part of the world you're in, can go see kind of how to highlight this. I highlight this mostly as a way, obviously, to kind of incentivize your users. So, potentially you've got, like I mentioned earlier, a challenge or some sort of use case or some sort of end user type of learning session. Everyone likes free stuff. If you can kind of provide people that with some of the lovely Google branded stuff, it's a great way to kind of incentivize those users, maybe in a training, to say, here's a pair of, that's a cool bicycle shirt, or a cool pair of socks, or a hat, or something, right? To say, great work in this training session. Here's some, fruits of your labor. Next, we'll just quickly touch on this. We'll share this all in the end, but I think a great way, kind of especially in our modern world, is just to stay up to date on social media. It's a great place to go to find updates, to see kind of how tos, tips and tricks, use cases, helpful videos. We've got our Google Workspace Instagram. As you can see, Google Workspace, it's verified. It's pretty easy name there. Good place to go to just to see kind of if Instagram is a platform you're curious on. We've also got our Facebook page, which is fun updates, tips and tricks. All these are very similar, right? But it's just using the platforms themselves, kind of in their different differentiators. We've got our Twitter page, which, as you can see there, Google Workspace, great place to go to kind of, again, see updates, potentially events like this, kind of helpful videos. Workspace support Twitter. So kind of very similar to using support is going following this one. It's a great one, great place to follow kind of, bug fixes, updates, anything that's kind of either changed or support is working on. It's a good one to stay on top of, especially if you're an admin. Developers Twitter, if you're deep in the weeds as a developer, that's a great one to follow. As you can see, we've got 332,000 awesome developers out there who follow this and kind of stay on top of this with updates. Kind of, again, just we all digest information differently in the world, and using these different platforms outside of just straight line Google searching something or following the community. If these are kind of ways to add kind of understanding or developing kind of your tool belt of staying on top of Workspace, all great things. We've got our Google Workspace YouTube page, which this is probably the #1 place I go to when I'm trying to figure something out for Workspace, is going to our YouTube page, right? We've all either used YouTube or understand the power of it and can go in here and search something on Google Chat. Let's say Google Chatbot is what we're curious on. You go in there, watch a YouTube video on it, something in that sense about kind of how to get more out of there. Introducing Google Workspace, productivity tips. Again, YouTube itself, right? They can teach you how to build a 2-piece Lego set, or it could take you a 400,000 piece puzzle and they could talk you through that. So again, using YouTube to leverage kind of your workspace setup and kind of ultimately that productivity and driving the product forward. Perfect. So I know that's been a lot of content, 45 minutes or so now. Thank you for joining. I think what we'll do now is I will go back to the questions and see if there's any either questions or comments or thoughts that you all have. If not, again, thanks for joining today. Really appreciate your time. And I think what we'll do after this call is we'll send an email to you all that have registered. We'll also create a blog post on the community with these resources, right? I think I touched on 25 to 30 some odd different web pages and topics. I hope you weren't scrambling and writing those down. We'll send that out after, so that way it's not you having to either try to remember what I said or what the different acronym was for the community versus developer community and something in that sense. So stay tuned for that also. We want to make sure you're equipped with that going forward. And otherwise, I'm going to go back to the questions to see kind of what else is out there. Perfect. All right, let's go to some questions. All right, Anna, if a nonprofit is free, why is there a 14-day trial period? So actually with that question, I don't have the exact answer because I don't necessarily know your exact use case. I would take that back to your Workspace or Google Cloud account executive to both talk you through kind of what the setup looks like, what that time period looks like, kind of what the actual kind of those legal terms and or kind of what the setup itself looks like. It's a great question, but I would take that back to your account executive or the person you are working on Workspace just to ask that question specifically to say, here's what I understand. What does this look like on paper and or actually in practice? All right, Susan, hello from New Jersey. Wondering about using a group email for our office admin. Oh, thanks for pinning that, Lauren. Wondering about using a group email for our office admin. I actually think that's a great idea. We use that a lot here. I think one thing we do is you kind of either use a subset of aliases, you use different types of kind of the setup in the back end. I think there's a lot out there on both the community as well as docs about the actual setup of that. Because I think each of us potentially could use an office admin differently, right? An office admin could be an administrative assistant for an executive, or it could be someone that kind of is Pam from the office that sits at the front desk and kind of uses kind of pulls her strings in that sense. So it's a great idea. It's something that we use often here on all those different levels, but understanding kind of what else is out there and just diving into some of those resources might be a great place to start there. All right, Karen, I'm not sure why a plus account with 5 limit has shared drive. Are the shared drives included in? So I actually don't know the exact answer to that question either. I'd say I would go to 3 places for that. I would say go search or look on the community to see if you can find any information out there. I would say even go directly ask support. So go ask support themselves, kind of what that looks like. If not that, then I would go ask your kind of account executive, kind of what those limits and those space components look like. So sorry to not have a direct answer there, but I think hopefully one of those 3 different avenues will support you. Again, Karen, love the tools. Our nonprofit is looking to upgrade the Business Plus account with one user because drive space is key. Can we have multiple people be admins of that one user account who can manage the drive? So I think there's multiple layers to that question too. So I think there's a lot in terms of the setup on the back end from kind of the admin perspective on what a user looks like, a user group, kind of an alias in that sense to kind of manage that group. The short answer is yes, but I don't know if it's necessarily just one user account. I would take again that same question is probably a great question for the community just to see how others have set it up. I think that hundreds upon thousands of either users or customers are using setup like that, but asking them kind of how they've either gone about this, what that looks like from the actual kind of back end setup, that'd be a great place to go through there. But all awesome questions. Let's see. Also, it looks like Lauren, thank you for providing some answers there to the questions as well. Perfect. Well, it doesn't look like there's any other questions for now. Again, thank you all for joining. Stay tuned for kind of that follow-up email, that blog post, as well as a community post. We're really excited to kind of work with you all kind of in the start of your journey here with Workspace. And I think again, being equipped with these resources, it ultimately helped me be better at understanding Workspace in my job. And hopefully it's a great kind of starting point and foundation for you all to kind of understand the who, what, when, where, why of where you should go to kind of either dive into a question, follow a video to get more out of your product, to log a feature request, all of that. So again, thanks for joining today, whether it's early for you all or mid-afternoon or even maybe night some places in the world. Appreciate you all joining. Again, thanks again, and look forward to working with you all in the future and kind of collaborating both on events and in the community. If that's it for now. Oh, looks like Robert did have a question. We're just starting Workspace for a nonprofit org that our users are not very technically savvy. Is there someone I can talk to for help? It's a very good question, Robert. I think that using those resources we provided today could be a good start. I do think leveraging something like a partner or professional services for at least kind of a high level shell of an engagement, kind of tailoring towards your needs as well as kind of what those kind of technical requirements are and or don't have could be a good starting point. I think that's probably the place I would go to. Also, you can leverage your account executive for some of those kind of questions or guidance on where to go. But I think there's kind of either multiple flavors there. It could be more self-service where you're going to learn and understand this yourself, or you could go down the route of kind of a partner or professional services type engagement to say, here's where we're at, here's where our users are at, and or that technical gap or where they don't know. How do we drive that forward to make sure that we're getting more out of this? Perfect. And Lauren just shared the workspace there. Bob, is there anything negative about not using R Drive tools and not email? I actually don't know. If you could maybe provide a bit more information there, we could probably, Bob, I can follow up with you after and see kind of if we can dive deeper in there. It's also a great question to ask on the community too. I think that a lot of those customers are a bit more in the weeds with some of these deeper kind of technical requirements than someone like myself. Awesome. Well, if there's no more questions, we'll go ahead and shut it down for today and give you all a couple minutes back. Again, appreciate the time, appreciate the questions, and kind of look forward to not only working with you all in the future, but kind of seeing how you can get more out of Google Workspace and kind of drive your business going forward. All right. Have a good one.